So in 1949, there was a young lady that attended Garfield High School, and am I working with this and this? Oh, excellent, excellent. And she went to Garfield. Actually, she started out as a young girl in East Los Angeles, and her father in those days, when it was time, when they exceeded their visa, they were sent back to Mexico. So she watched her father get beat up, put in a paddy wagon, and lost her father at 5. Wrote him many letters. At 11, her mother passed away of childbearing, and they moved the bed, and there were all the letters. So this young lady was a little devastated. At 11 years old, she started piecing her life together. She was put in different homes, told that at one point she was told that she was very much loved and that she wanted to be adopted, but she noted the people that she was working for put her away at 5 o'clock, and she said, well, maybe they like me because I clean really good. So she declined it to wait for her own family. This young lady was a dreamer, but for survival. But when she went to Garfield, there was a woman. This woman called her into the nurse's office because she was the nurse, and she examined her in such a way. Now, I've never met the woman. I don't know if she was big or small, white or black. I don't know anything about this woman. But I do know that that day she inspired a young woman. That woman got out of that room, and she was so excited about being a nurse that she ran to the counselor's office and said, can I be a nurse? And the counselor looked at her and said, oh, I'm sorry, Mariana. You're an orphan. You're a Mexican orphan. You have no money. There is no way you can be a nurse. Listen, you go home and have a family. That's what you're supposed to do. So she walked home that day, and I'm sure a lot of thoughts raced through her mind. But when she got home, she says, I'm going to wait for my family. She did meet a man at church. She married him, and she had a son. From that moment forward, she was on the lookout. She was still inspired. Do you remember when you were inspired? Was there ever a time in your life when you experienced that word? I'm so inspired. I wish I could do this. Now, if you have a mental note in your mind, I want you to write that wish down and don't forget it till later. All right? Put that in the back of your mind. When you were inspired, I want you to take a mental note of that. This woman began to weave into her life that inspiration. She heard things that I don't think the other people that spoke to her knew she was hearing. She took the baby to church, and the preacher looked at the baby and touched him, and she remembers specifically he held his feet, and I guess he quoted the verse about bearers of good news, and said, this baby's going to be a doctor. She took that as a prophecy. So she went back home to her little home. Her husband was a postal worker at the time. They were both believers, of course, and she started to think of how she was going to get that boy to be a doctor. She let it go. The boy turned out to be super hyperactive, hard to manage, so she started playing games with him and turning him into learning experiences. She taught him how to read by making it a game. She says, I bet you can read this paper by the time I finish with you by the end of the day. It was a paragraph. She says, I want you to look for see, this is an I and this is a T. I don't know, he probably knew the alphabet by then, I and a T. She says, I want you to go on this paragraph and circle all the ITs. That's the word it. He says, I'm finished. She says, well, now look for A and D. She says, that's and. He says, oh, circle all the ands. So she did that throughout the paragraph until he could read the paragraph. This is how she worked with him. Well, when he turned 6, she really needed him a little bit out of the house. She had him walk 2 blocks to the Kern Library. She says, read Little Women. That was probably the only book she could think of. But anyway, he came home one day and said, I am through with the children's section, Mom. What do I do now? She says, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said something or other, and she sent him to the library. One day he came back, and she always asked him, what do you want to be when you grow up? He says, I want to be a doctor. So she says, you go right back to the library. She says, and you check out a book on the human body. And she said, you memorize every bone in that body. And he did. At 7 years old, not only did he know he was going to be a doctor, he had the confidence that he had conquered being a doctor already. He knew every bone in the body. Do you ever remember having that kind of confidence? Yeah. And how someone helped you get that confidence? I have a lot of memories, but I have too many to share, so I'm going to stop there. Take note. She was inspired. She used her creativity to speak to her child in an informed way. And at 7, he knew he was going to be a doctor. Today, he's Dr. John Thrope. He works at Beverly Oncology and Imaging Centers. He owns 7 radiation therapy treatment facilities, 2 in the Dominican Republic, 1 in Mexico, and he has now been invited to China to open up several cancer centers there as well. His specialty is brachytherapy, seed implants, hypothermia, heat treatment, broad scope of treatment that he couldn't stop studying. And one day he was interviewed, and they asked him, why are you doing this? And he said, because I remember my mother going to the Kern Clinic in East LA and asking for help on a certain issue, and they would always tell her no. He says, I want to say yes. So today, his whole purpose is to say, yes, we can. He now treats 75% for cure with radiation therapy. Now, that's not because he's so smart and good or anything. It's because generally, if it's not metastasized and it's small, radiation therapy, you don't need as much chemo because you can get rid of it quicker, and that's why they say find it early, because it's curable. And her daughter stands before you as the CEO of that company, who went through her own journey with her mother and father, and I'm about to introduce that to you. Now, I just want to tell you about the title, Listening, Learning, and Leadership. That wasn't the title I started with when I wrote this. I started with the word novice. And when we get through, you'll understand why leadership is actually practicing novice work. In business, how many of you are in the business school? Wonderful. In business, we learn management, right? Well, guess what? That went out the window a long time ago with the knowledge age coming into play. Why? There's change all the time. If nothing changed, you could be a good manager. You just count the widgets, move the buttons, print the whatever you're making, and you're done. We don't need managers anymore. We need leaders who can listen, learn, and inform. So this is a whole new business school education, and I was in it 3 times. First in 1975, Pepperdine University, and then the second time, business school, and luckily Pepperdine was just starting behavioral science and management. By 1989, they had convinced all the USC professors to leave and start a program called the Executive Management Program, and I was in the 7th class. Boy, was that an experience. But in the first one, we were learning about how to manage in these silos. You pick your career and you work in this accounting category, and that's it. When I went back, all these big companies were laying off people. I had managers from the the name of the airport that's no longer there is McDonnell Douglas, laying off hundreds of people every day, because smaller companies were moving faster than they were. And I remember asking the organizational development professor that was there, he was there when I was there earlier and now, and I said, what's the difference, doctor? What's the difference? And he said, the difference is that corporate America needs to learn smallness now, because it's the small companies with all the information that's competitively out there for anybody to get. The big corporations don't own the knowledge anymore. It's everywhere. So now we don't need managers as much as we need leaders. And guess what? You're always learning. That's why listening becomes a significant piece of this. So I think I used the top button, correct? All right. This is my short journey. I tried to put it on a page for you, so it's not too long. And I didn't know it, but as a child, I was looking for significance. I think most humans do. I would come home. My mother was somewhat ill. They diagnosed her as manic depressive. So she was in bed a lot, and I didn't really have a mother that went to school with me or anything. It was my father. He did everything with me. And I had 4 brothers. So one day, I'm in the middle. I'm the middle child. I climbed up on the chair around the table like we normally did Friday night, because he wanted the family to be together every Friday night to talk about the Word of God or whatever. And so I crawled up on the chair. I must have been about 5, still young enough to crawl on the chair, I guess. And I remember loving my daddy. He was an amazing man. He just carried himself so wonderfully, and I always knew he was there. He had special names. So I was his Tweety Pie, and my brother was Knups Kapoops, and I don't know what he'd make up for everybody. But he was a wonderful father. And I crawled up there and I said, Daddy, someday I want to be a good daddy, just like you. Whoa. That inspiration got squashed immediately because my brothers started laughing so hard they could hardly stay on the chair. And they said, Ruth, you're never going to be a daddy. And I said, well, why not? And I didn't realize that I translated that I was deformed, because everybody else at the table got to be a daddy and I don't get to be a daddy. I thought you were a girl and then a boy and then a mom and then a daddy. Made sense to me. Oh, come on, I had to be less than 5 years old to think that. But anyway, so my search for significance began, because I didn't know. I didn't have a mother really active enough to be a role model for me. And all I saw were the male figures. So that informed me for the rest of my life negatively. All right? I went through the rest of my life thinking I couldn't be something. Now, it wasn't intentional. It just happened to be a real fact of life, but the way I was informed was disappointing. So I went to school in about 6th grade. There was this wonderful woman. She happened to be African American in a 4th Street elementary school. I think she was the only one there that was African American, but she had this gift. And we would sing for a Christmas program, and she would get everybody to participate. One day she was just fed up with the boys because they were just playing around all the time. She says, Ruth, go all the way to the other side of the auditorium, and I want you to sing. Well, it just so happens my dad has a very loud voice, and I have a very loud voice. So she says, and I want all these guys over here to hear you. So, boy, I bellowed. And the boys, all of a sudden, she says, now I want you to match that. So they bellowed back. They tried to match my bellow. I guess I was pretty loud then. But for the first time, I saw myself in a useful place. Maybe for the wrong reasons. But later on that year, Mrs. Eastman looked at the class and she says, you know, you all need to learn leadership. You all need to learn about government. She says, we're going to start a student council at 4th Street Elementary School. And she says, whoever wants to run for president can run for president. So everybody was raising their hand, and I'm sitting there. And she says, okay, all of you that raised your hands, you can sign up, and Ruth, you sign up too. And I searched for something to inform me. And the only thing that informed me was my older brother, John, who happened to be running for president at Garfield High School. So I said, oh, good, maybe I can ask him a few questions. So that was where I got my informing at that point. So I went back, and boy, did we go to town. I stole his speech. Can you imagine an 11-year-old girl getting up and saying, students, faculty, and administration. No, it was administration, faculty, and fellow students. Okay, that obviously was not my speech. That was my brother's speech. But anyway, the faculty was bent over laughing, but I had a ball. I won by a landslide. Whatever I did, I won by a landslide. That was a journey into maybe I can do something. Maybe I'm not invisible. Maybe it's not just cute when I copy my brothers. Maybe I could actually be somebody. So I learned the violin. And I found solace in the violin. Oh my goodness, it was just like me. I was super skinny. I had a squeaky voice. And I sounded awful. And my brothers always didn't want me around. And so I said, boy, I'm just like this violin. I found comfort in this beautiful violin. So I learned to play the violin in elementary school. I didn't know anything about private lessons, so when I went to junior high school, they asked me if I had had private lessons, and yeah. So they put me first chair, second violinist. I was lost, but I figured it out. And I figured it out so well that I moved up to first chair violinist. And at that time, Cal State Conservatory had an orchestra for students in high schools that wanted to develop. And my Mr. Tavis, he invited me to attend. He walked me into the auditorium and sat me down behind the second chair violinist. And I heard the beautiful piece they were playing, and I looked at the music, and I picked it up, and it was wonderful. And then they gave me the private test. And they put the music in front of me, and I wasn't quite sure what to do. So I tried to figure out how it went, but I couldn't. And I discovered something about me. I didn't know how to read notes. I knew how to listen and play the notes once I heard them. I could play by ear, but I couldn't play by notes. I'd never had private lessons, remember? And they just threw me into the orchestra, and so I figured it out. And I was devastated. They put me in the kindergarten. Tavis came through. He was my orchestra teacher. And he walked through, and the look on his face that his first chair violinist was sitting in kindergarten, it went white and purple and yellow. And he said to me, "Cut out of there." So I came out of there, and he put me in front of a teacher, and I don't know how he knew, but he had her ask me to try out for second chair violinist at the Cal State Conservatory no matter what. He says, "I don't care, I still want you to try her. I don't care that you put her in kindergarten. You listen to her play." Well, thank God I was there earlier and he stuck me in behind the second chair violinist, right? Because I picked up that violin and it sung. I became second chair violinist even though I couldn't read notes for the Cal State Conservatory program. So that was very interesting. But there was no one there to inform me that if you play that well by listening, guess what? Let me coach you a little bit on the skill, on the notes. But there was no one there. I haven't played violin since junior high school, which is sad. And I keep saying someday I'm going to go back. That impacted my life going forward, because I always thought, even if I shine, I'm going to be discovered that I'm a phony. And that followed me for many, many years. My brother went to medical school, of course, and I went to Pepperdine. I had a culture and educational shock. I went from East Los Angeles to Malibu. What do? You drive in there in a 64 Chevy and 10-year-old car, whatever it is. And here comes Sidney Poitier with his daughter in a limo. And you come out with your cardboard suitcase from Kmart, and she comes out with these ugly brown bags. Oh, they were Gucci. So maybe it informed me about different communities, different cultures, and having to learn while I studied. So I already have kind of 3 negatives coming in with me, informing me. They're my informers. Life informs us. And I go there, and now, well, I guess this one is the 3rd one. So I finished school, but there was one thing I loved, and that was accounting. I mean, I would do my accounting last. It would take me forever. I'm really not that good at it, but I loved it. I loved the fact that you could balance everything. And I would go in and in those days, there weren't these big computers either. So you had to do these big spreadsheets and do all the math, and I loved it. So I didn't do that well the first year. As a matter of fact, I almost didn't make it through the first year, but I had to teach myself to study because the culture shock and educational shock was that I went to Garfield High School and they didn't teach me anything. And I was going to school with people that came out of private school. So I had to learn fast how to survive. I made it through in 3 years. And then I went to work. I was married by that time, a gentleman from Pepperdine, and he was studying law at the time. And I went to Tran Telecommunication. But first, I didn't get there that quick, ladies. Every job I went to, they'd say, "How fast can you type?" Remember, this is 1978, okay? And I'm saying, "Oh, but I have a bachelor's degree in business." "Well, how fast can you type?" "Well, 30 words a minute with a lot of mistakes." And I couldn't get a job. So finally I went in to be a filing clerk. So I went to Tran Telecommunication, and I just said, I'm not going to brag about I've got a bachelor's degree because it's useless. I'm just going to go in and do some work. So I went in and I started filing. I finished my filing in 1 hour. So I'd go to the export lady and go, "Gladys, how can I help you?" "Oh, put the paper clips on these things." "Oh, but what is this form and what is that form?" Within 90 days, I was running the Department of Market Forecasting. And my manager had given me full authority to evaluate the performance of the sales reps. So I invented, since I loved accounting so much, right? I invented this performance analysis for them. And so it was wonderful. I learned a lot. But back in 1978, that was when there still were not some of the harassment issues fully developed. And men were all over the place, having affairs here and there. And living a tight ship was very difficult. But we managed with the help of the Lord. And I had to put myself in prayer because I didn't want to lose my job. My husband was in law school. And, but I made it through telecommunication when my brother called me. And he said, "Ruth, I really need help." He says, we really need help. I just built a building in Montebello, and the contractor went bankrupt, and all of the subcontractors are shooting at me through the window. They want their money. I went, "Boy, well, who are you going to pay?" "I don't know." I said, "Well, don't you know, your accounting, you're right." "No." I went to his office, and there was a big box of bills. So I went to work. I got him his first loan. I didn't know any better. 28% interest in 1978. I didn't know any better. So we got it for 5 years. We paid it off. We went into the guy in Orange County that gave us the loan, and he goes, "Oh, shucks," except he didn't say shucks. "I I thought I was going to own that building. And I looked at my brother, and he looked at me. He says, no, this is your final check. All right, so we left. And now it's history. By that time, I was developing the corporate structure within Beverly Oncology, and things were moving along, and I decided that I wanted to found the first HMO in the area because we had a lot of Hispanics that did not have a good communication with their physicians, so we started to work on that project, and I said, you know what? I need more. So I learned some lessons. I went to Pepperdine. I guess I covered that already. I learned in my MBA program that there is such a thing as a corporate culture. And I didn't know that before. Well, guess what informs your corporate culture? Your story, your experience, those inspirational moments, those moments where you succeeded and someone else didn't succeed as much as you did. All of that tells your employees a story that they are recording the way they want to record it, unless you help inform them that it's really going towards what? Your mission. What's your mission in life? Have you crafted your mission? Have you listened to your story yet? You're listening to mine very patiently. But have you listened to yours long enough to craft your mission? Some people call it a calling. Some people call it a job. Some people call it a vision, a goal. But really the mission is all-encompassing. Some one phrase that can sum it up. Do you have one of those? If you don't, if you do, please write it down or keep a mental note about your mission. Remember when you were inspired. They may not relate right now, okay? Remember when you were inspired. Know your mission by listening to your story, and you'll be surprised what you come up with. We came up with in Beverly Oncology best outcomes. We worked at it. We knew there was a triangle. We wanted to be high-tech, state-of-the-art. We wanted to be fully informed on the technology side, and we wanted all of our employees to be the best that they could be. So when we summed it up, it's all written in the mission. It's a 2-paragraph mission, but there's 2 dark words. And I expect everyone in my company, when we have Christmas and Thanksgiving, as a matter of fact, everybody warns everybody else, make sure you know those 2 words, because she's going to come up to you and ask you, what's our mission? It's best outcomes, not better. Best. That means, Miss Receptionist, do you know how all the other receptionists are? Are you the best? Yeah, think about it. Yeah, think about that radiation therapy technologist. Are you the best? Not better. Are you the best? Now, that doesn't mean we all get to be the best, but if you're not striving for it, if you don't reach for the stars, you won't get stardust on your eyelids, ladies. If you don't reach for the stars, you won't get stardust on your eyelids. Listen to your story and the passion and the vision for a better tomorrow that you build for others. That's my recommendation. But I want you to make sure you have a mission. The other thing I learned that I love, and I am a SWOT enthusiast. I do everything with SWOT analysis, and I want you to learn what it is if you don't know. A SWOT is when you take a guy in the back room and spank him really hard. No. A SWOT stands for strengths, and you business people can help me out, okay? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you put a big cross, plus sign, and on the top is your internal assessment, strengths and weaknesses. That's what you have. The bottom is your external influences, your opportunities, and your threats. Got the visual? Don't forget it. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I use it for everything. I even use it for my own life because it informs me that I need to think like a business person even in my own life. You know what they say about the SWOT? The biggest mistake a business owner can do in their SWOT is to take their strengths and try and fix their weaknesses. You think that'll ever happen? And in the meantime, I come along or somebody else comes and steals the opportunity that was waiting for you to grab. Well, you're busy fixing your weaknesses. But how do you know that's the opportunity you're supposed to grab? What informs you? There's only one thing that informs you if you were supposed to grab that opportunity. Okay, business students, I'm going to put you to the test. What informs you whether you should take the opportunity or not? Who's a business student? I only want a business student. They're all hiding. Okay. It's this. Do your strengths score as high as they can or more than anything else to win that opportunity and avoid, because you're not fixing your weaknesses, so you must what? Avoid your weaknesses. So we decided, what are we going to do in the future? Well, we wanted to expand. So we did a SWOT analysis and we found out, oh my goodness, all our staff is bilingual. All our staff is high tech. If we move across the United States, that's great, but not everybody needs the bilingual. So why don't we go into international? Because when we did our SWOT analysis, everything we did gave us a high score. All of our strengths scored higher. So I say I'm an enthusiast and I'm making you imagine all these things. This is how you do it. You have your mission. You choose what opportunity you want to measure. You put that at the top of your big box. I want to measure going into Latin countries. Let's see, does bilingual help that? Yes, that's a plus. Does speaking Chinese help that? No, that's a negative. So you add your pluses and your minuses and you say, which one of those strategies really is supported by my strengths, avoids my weaknesses, enhances my opportunities, and avoids my threats? Because there are things we can't fix. Some of them are, I'm olive-skinned. I can't change that. But it might be a weakness in going into some place. So I want to avoid that in terms of my opportunities. All right, does that make sense? All right. So what inspired you? What is your mission? Are you listening to your story? And now, what opportunities are you taking today to minister to your mission? And which one of all the opportunities that are present to you make the most sense given your strengths? So at this point, I'm really learning, right? I'm getting super excited. And I'm already involved in the Latin Business Association. Oh my goodness, machismo. And for the last 30 years, there was never a woman president, except at the very beginning, and she was supposedly working with a kitchen cabinet of men that would tell her what she could do and not do. Well, that wasn't for me. So I started small. I said, first, I just want to grow people's businesses. Because deep down in my personal mission, I really learned that economics was incredibly powerful. My father ended up being a minister and I wanted to help the world, but I realized if there's no money, I can't help the world. So maybe my dad will be the preacher, but I'm going to be the soils person. I'm going to feed the soil, water the plant. That's what my ministry is. And it's bigger than that since then because I've also learned I want to find your treasure and show you that you can shine brighter than me for God if you find your treasure. Do you know, okay, I'm getting off on another subject, but we'll get there. In my business, everybody did what I said because what? I was the CEO. So I said, I really want to learn leadership without paying somebody. So I got into the LBA and really fought there. And I kept moving up. I ended up chairman of the Business Development Committee, ended up treasurer, ended up vice chair to the man that put George Bush The first speech that George Bush made was at the Latin Business Association. Hector Barreto was my president. He then became administrator of the SBA. And we hosted George Bush's first event. So I learned a lot. By that time I was vice chairman, and after that I was the first woman chairman, because they used to be presidents, that was there for 4 years, re-elected, a 2-year term, re-elected for 2 terms. And what I accomplished there was really tried to learn to grow entrepreneurs. Our average size was $250,000 per company, and by the time I left, we were engaging with $5 million, excuse me, $250,000 to $5 million in size. Now you're really tracking in the economy. The $250,000 businesses are great. They're great to make a living, but you're not really engaged in the bigger economy until you get past the $1,000 mark, $1 million mark, maybe, but 5 million is the real game. So that was my goal, and I got there. So I remember sitting down and saying, wow, everything is perfect. Tragedy happens. That year, I was in my last year as chairman of the Latin Business Association. What do? Do I quit? Well, first of all, I was in stinking denial that he was sick. He went to see my brother, and I never saw my brother my brother has always been my hero, right? And I sat down, I said, John, you are going to talk to me and Dawn together. So he kept avoiding it. He kept sending him to other doctors, but he knew what was wrong. So we went into his consultation room and we sat down and I said, John, what's the real story? He wouldn't even look at my husband. He looked at me and he said, you've got 90 days if you do nothing. If you do something, you have 6 months. I should have stopped everything. To this day, I regret it. But I was still in denial, and how do I stop? I was the favorite speaker at every membership meeting. I was leading the LBA. I was running my home health agency. I was running Biola. I didn't know where to stop. I was in the fast lane. Everything was beautiful. I was on all kinds of boards. I was busy. I didn't know how to fit my husband in that way. And my husband is a wonderful man. He was amazing. He was an atheist when I met him at Pepperdine, and he became a powerful minister. But he was a lawyer, but he was a lay minister as well. Powerful man, and all of my strength, I believe, was because this man was so good to me. He gave me space to shine brighter than him. What a man. I remember after he passed away that Saturday, my daughter and my son and I, they were both in high school now. I walked into there was a round foyer. I walked in, fell on my knees, and I screamed out from some guttural level, God, what do you want from me? I wondered if I told my husband the truth, was he really going to heaven? Was there really a heaven? Is God real? I don't trust you, God. I don't trust you farther than I can throw that chair. I'm going to have my first grandchild, and he passed away April the 18th of 2002. My grandson is due May 9th. He passed away, May 18th, 5/18/02. Okay, May 18th. He's due May 9th. My daughter's birthday is May 22nd. As a matter of fact, she went to Whittier Christian High School down there, and they all closed the whole school and came to the funeral. It was just so wonderful. She was a cheer captain, and They were wonderful people down at Whittier Christian. And they closed the school. He was the cheer dad because I was so busy. He went to all the cheer meetings. He would leave work at 3 o'clock, finish his law work, and come home and be mom dad. And take Matthew to Taekwondo and Virginia to cheers. And then when the women would all go to the cheer competition, he'd sit on the bench, get a book, and tell them, don't worry, I'll take care of all your purses. Just put them right here. The stories I heard after he died were just so beautiful. They were like a huge bouquet of roses. Everyone was telling me things I never knew he did for them. So I thank God for him. But this baby's coming, and so I'm sorry, I'm a little bit emotional. I just hope it comes right on time, or on my daughter's birthday, not in the middle. So this obviously devastated me. I told my children at Christmas, I had my in-laws over for Christmas for the last time. He had passed away, and we all had Christmas together at my house, but boy, did that wear on me. It really hurt. And I told my kids, go out with your cousins. I'm going to Dana Point. That's my favorite hideout. That's my place where I get inspired. It's my place where I pray. It's my secret hiding place. So I went back to the Marriott there in Dana Point. It wasn't Marriott then, but I went there. And, oh yeah, it was. Okay, but anyway, and I said, God, you better tell me what's going on here, because I can't take this. I don't even want to talk about New Year's. I guess I went after Christmas. Yeah, it was after Christmas, before New Year's. And I said, I don't have any faith. You're just going to have to show me. You know what? The Lord is so beautiful. You know how sometimes your husband gives you just the right flower or the right gift at the right time, or your mother gives you just the right thing for what you needed. The Lord sent me 3 women. I didn't ask for 3 women. But isn't that beautiful? He saw me crying and he sent me 3 women to inform me. The first woman broke the alabaster box of ointment on Jesus' feet. He said, that's faith, honey. She gave her best. I don't want to hear it, I said. You took my best. I don't have the best to give you anymore because you took it. I never knew I was so angry. But I'm at Dana Point, nobody's there, my kids can't see me, so boy, did I go to town in my room. You took my best. I don't have any best to give you now. Okay, Ruth, read the next portion. Oh, the woman who put in 2 pence. How's she going to eat at 5 o'clock? How's she going to buy whatever she needs to survive? He said she put in her all, that she gave more than all the rich men. She didn't just give her all, she gave her whole life. I said, listen, I am not going there. You can forget it. I can't trust you further than I can throw you. No. I'm not going to give you my all. That means I got to trust you for tomorrow. I have no hope for tomorrow. How can I trust you for tomorrow? And then he said, well, if you don't have enough strength to do those 2, just seek my face. That's all. Just seek my face. That's all. When you're too weak to trust, seek his face. He's there. Now, how did that speak to me? It informed me. She knew where the treasure was hidden. Mary, who watched where they laid him, she had a purpose. She knew that after the Shabbat, she was going to go back and put the ointment upon the body. And she had a fear, but she knew the Lord would take care of it. I don't think, she wasn't so sure. It says that she said she didn't know who would remove the stone. But what a great revelation. She got there and the stone was gone. An angel informed him that he was risen. God revealed his resurrection to a woman first. He presented his deity to the Samaritan woman first. Mary, who bore Jesus, that isn't the same Mary, but Mary who bore Jesus was informed by the angel. Joseph was never told until weeks later. Mothers, there is a verse in the Bible, I wish I could remember, I just remembered this. My mother just passed away this year, and my brother who had all these kids at once said that she quoted him a verse that, I wish I could remember where it is, but that the Lord provides special grace for those with child. She says, you may have one child after another. They're 11 months apart. My sister-in-law was quite fertile. But she said, but God has special grace for those who rear children. And she gave him that verse that he never forgot. But we are the mothers of many successful people, men, women alike. And we are the informers. But are you informed? Are you informed about your own story so that you don't clash with their story? And is your story big enough so that they can shine better than you? I'm a novice. I might be a little bit seasoned, but I'm still a novice. How am I doing on time? I think I got to wrap it up. Okay. My new journey in listening, learning, and leadership. I learned that listening is for discovery. The greatest joy you might ever have sometime is when you discover your purpose, or you discover salvation even. I mean, the joy of discovering that it's so simple that he died for my sins. I mean, the joy of that discovery. Do you remember that? It was for me. I used to lay down and sing, was it for me? For me alone? He left his glorious throne. I mean, discovery is a joyful thing. It is the work of God to hide a matter. It is the work of kings, leaders, to discover a matter. Did you know that? I think that's in Proverbs. I meant to look it up. I'm sorry, ladies. But it's the work of God to hide things. It's your job to find it. That's why listening to people's story or listening to what's happening in your life to inform you is why you're a leader. Much can be learned by listening to the person, to listen for their story or context. This gives you the power to do what? Speak into their listening. Okay? For example, I had somebody that was talking to me in Spanish, and I speak Spanish, but not all the words, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. They kept talking louder and louder and louder, but say, I'm sorry, I can hear you. I just don't know what that word means. Has that ever happened to you? He couldn't speak into my listening because he didn't speak my language. And use that as a metaphor for, if you don't know your own story, you're not going to hear their story because you don't know what's cluttering up in your life that's cluttering up the communication with them. And you're not speaking into their listening. You talk to them straight in the face. I told him clear as crystal that he cannot do that anymore, and he just keeps on doing it. All right, something to think about. Learning is relearning. That's why I'm a novice. Change is inevitable. We must learn and relearn. Loss can come at any time. Lost my violin, lost my husband, but learning must be a way of being. There's three secrets to leadership. Number one, listen to your own story. The highlights, the disappointments, the joy, the pain, they inform you to begin the journey of leadership. Got that? Number two, listen to learn. Being a listener for the treasure in others. That third thing told me immediately that was my ministry. My calling is to find your treasure and have you pull it out. I want you to shine brighter than me. I want you to give glory to God. Many live their entire life and never are present to the gifts that God. Can you imagine living your whole life and not knowing the treasure that's inside of you? I hope that's not any person in this room. I hope, if nothing else, I pray that God will show you your treasure, because you are a treasure. He made you, and he put his mark on you. Every one of your fingers is a different fingerprint than somebody else. And I didn't wear my big, giant snowflake that I wore all through the Christmas season, but I wore big old Brighton. Do you know Brighton purses? I know the age group that goes there. You ladies wouldn't know. But they have this beautiful silver snowflake. And it was my ministry all during the season. I said, do you know that every snowflake is a wonder of God? It is uniquely designed, geometrically, perfectly geometrical, and unique to every other snowflake. That's my God. Isn't that beautiful? I had this big, I wish I could have brought it today. Didn't go with this outfit. Okay. Listen when you listen patiently to find the passion, the creativity, and the possible solution or promise for this situation or person. That's what you're looking for. It's the possibility. So it's not a match where you're fighting each other. It leads you to leadership. Reveal their story back to them to reinforce your being where they are. Paul said to the Greeks, you know that altar to the unknown God? Well, I'm going to tell you who he is. He spoke into their listening. They knew that there was something that happened years ago that was so phenomenal when they had to put that altar. And it was the only altar left to the unknown God. And he used it as an opening to speak to the people of Greece. Coach. Pull in your life story and experience to inform in technique, pardon my spelling error, my writing errors here, strategy and best performance. Catch people doing things right. Remember Blanchard, the 1-minute manager? Catch them doing it right. Let them know that was fabulous. I love the way that you handled that patient. It really made a difference in her life, I can tell. I'm just so thankful that you did that for her. You went out of the way to do that, and I appreciate it. Challenge. Once trust is established, lean in. Challenge them where you know their real treasure is, and they will appreciate it. They'll get it. They'll get it. Once you've established trust, lean in and help them see their hidden treasure. Okay. Peter Vale. This is all of these business writers that had to change their teachings over the years. Peter Drucker was one of them, Peter Vale. He said, learning and leadership must be about learning about this complex, subtle subtle learning process that a leader goes through over and over again. I'm a novice. I might be seasoned, but tomorrow God's going to call me to meet somebody that's a harder treasure to find. It's a bigger challenge. I may lose everything I have, but I belong to Jesus. And I know that I'm going to go through it over and over. You never arrive. I thought I had arrived. I remember sitting, taking in a deep breath and thinking, boy, I've really made it, you know? And then tragedy hit. So beware. The nurse who informed my mother must have seen many other students that day, but to my mom, she was a leader in her everyday way. I expect to see that nurse someday. She inspired 5 children with no money. The Lord provided. I remember they asked her, how are you going to put your son through medical school? He ended up getting, he too went to Garfield and told him he wanted to be a doctor. They said, no, you have to be an auto mechanic. And he said, why? He says, because there's nobody going to pay for your education. They told him the same thing. He fought for 3 months to get physics and chemistry. He was a double major, went to UCLA, passed all of that, was invited to go to medical school, passed his boards the first time around, and was trained at USC. So God had the path because of her faith. And she saw it before anybody else did. But she got a California State Scholarship and the whole thing was covered. Same for me. I had a California State Scholarship at the time. And I was able to go to Pepperdine, so I didn't have to go to any of those. My brother said, UCLA is not for a Christian girl. Well, anyway, that was back in 1975, okay? So he told my dad, they're just putting up a college over there in Malibu. You should send her there. So that's how I went to Pepperdine. But I expect to see this woman someday. She influenced my family. She influenced my brothers and sisters. And I don't know who she is. Listening, learning, and leading. Have you listened to the key points of your story? Do you have enough space to let someone else's story shine before God? Do you know where the treasure is hidden in your family, friends, and employees? And who have you inspired today? Do you remember how it felt? Go back to that memory of when you were inspired. Now I want to ask you, if you had to rewrite your mission, what would it be? I don't need to know. You remember the inspiration you had. It may or may not relate. Maybe you've been inspired by something else now. But what's your mission? That's the whole goal.
Biola University prepares Christians to think biblically about everything, from science to business to education and the arts. Learn more at biola.edu.